and we're going to start with Maggie Shannon. Maggie, it's all yours.
Awesome. Okay. Cool. Well, I just want to start off and say thank you so much, Frank, for having us and creating the space for us to share our work. It's such a special thing. And I feel like all three of us are kind of sharing ongoing projects. So it's really lovely to have this space to talk about it and share it with all of you. And I'm so excited because, you know, Molly and Kate are amazing photographers, and I'm also lucky enough to call them my friends.
Great.
But yeah, so hi, I'm Maggie Shannon. I'm a documentary photographer, documentary and portrait-based photographer based out of Los Angeles, California. I'm originally from Martha's Vineyard, and I received my MFA from the School of Visual Arts in New York City. My work aims to tell the stories of smaller communities and social rituals with the goal of lifting edge voices. And my approach is led and anchored by honesty, empathy, and curiosity. I was one of PDN's 30 for 2018, and my work has appeared in American Photo 35 and 36. My first book, Swamp Yankee, told the story of New England shark fishermen, and my latest ongoing project has me following midwives across Los Angeles as they navigate the pandemic, which is what I'm going to be talking about today.
Yeah, and Maggie, give us a little insight how that became something that intrigued you, and why you followed it, and how you made the inroads to be trusted to being a to photographing these stories.
Yeah, just getting into that right now. So when Los Angeles first went into lockdown, I was having a conversation with one of my good friends, Paige Swimmer, who's a practicing doula in LA. And I love our conversations because I always learn something new from her. And we're both so passionate about women's rights and women's health in particular. And so she was kind of wondering to me if there was going to be a rise in home births due to, hospitals banning partners, hospitals being overrun by sick patients. And we'd even heard a few cases of mothers being separated from their newborns at birth. So this seemed like such an important story to me. And so I started kind of digging around and reaching out to midwives across the country. So I started making calls on a Monday, and people were kind of like, we're not really seeing a rise. But then by that Friday, people were calling me back and saying that their phones were ringing off the hook, and like the demand was really high. And all the midwives that I talked to were really worried about this rise because, it's not the best way to do a home birth is to come at it from a place of fear. The midwives told me that they really like to start out with a client right when they find out that they're pregnant, because it really is a relationship built on trust, and getting to know each other is so important. And a lot of people were reaching out like a few weeks before their due date. And again, coming from that place of fear, which puts the mothers at risk, but also puts the midwives at risk as well. But, it's the possibility of going through a birth unmasked and in a familiar setting seemed to a lot of these people like the only option. So a few of the midwives that I had reached out to in LA offered to have me shadow them as they were doing home visits, which is when they go into someone's home and do a prenatal checkup and whatnot. And then also a few people were working out of birth centers, which is kind of a similar thing, but more of like, a private doctor's office. So yeah, and I was able to see kind of firsthand how their practices were shifting to protect themselves, their clients, and also their own families. So here, this is a midwife, Naomi Drucker, who I loved meeting so much. She's amazing. She not only has like 4 little boys at home, but she's also taking care of her elderly mother. So this burden to her was really huge. One of the midwives that I met while working on this was Shimon Perez. So she moved her entire birth clinic out into tents in the parking lot of her birth center. And then the inside space was reserved just for labor. Shemin is one of the few midwives that takes Medi-Cal, which is California's medical assistance program. And so this move just seemed like an obvious choice to her so she could continue to care for this population. She also put in like bins full of baby clothes, diapers, masks, disinfectant, and just like left them in front of her birth center so people could grab what they needed. And I felt like that really showed what a pillar a midwife can be to a community.
Yeah, and do they get any aid from the community for masks or anything, instruments that they might need?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure. That didn't really come up. I know that Shemin in particular was working with her city to get testing kits so she could keep testing herself and her staff, but I'm not sure about other things. But that's a good question. I'm going to look into that now. Yeah, so while working on this, I learned so much about birth and just like what our bodies are capable of. Birth is so unpredictable, and these midwives really showed such strength and perseverance. Sometimes they were handling back-to-back births that went on for hours. One time I was with Shemin and I was documenting one birth, and there were 2 others happening at the birth center. So yeah, it was an exhausting job for them and also the mothers too. Yeah, so I was struck by the courage of the mothers in labor as well. It was incredibly difficult not to put down my camera and offer some kind of comfort for them, like, touch a hand or, a shoulder or something. And I've never really documented anything that showed so much emotion before. So like not only pain and joy, but also, exhaustion, fear, guilt, which was heartbreaking to see. A lot of them felt guilt for not being able to do it. And then also like laughter. This was Jess Anderson's birth. This is Naomi on the left and her mother's on the right. So Jess obviously, was in pain for her birth, but between contractions, she was like joking around and petting her cats who were like so curious as to what was going on. But yeah, it was really incredible to see just that huge range.
And did a lot of these folks have it planned to have the birth this way and not be in the hospitals to start with, or just the circumstances itself lend to lead in this direction?
It was a range. I think 2 of the births that I photographed, they had already planned a home birth. But one, Taylor, she had, like, it was because of COVID that she went with a home birth, because she was worried about being, like, that her partner couldn't be in the room with her while she was giving birth. So, yeah, I mean, obviously I was nervous for my first birth experience, but really the energy that the midwives exuded was so calming. Even if someone was like totally freaking out, they were just like calmness personified, and it was such a special place to walk into and photograph with that kind of energy going around.
Well, that's got to be sort of interesting that you're focusing on the midwife while these women are having babies.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like that's a pretty interesting place to find your own thinking, right? Because clearly the mom is the focus, but I mean, like, how did you come up with that, Mag? Like, how do you separate that?
Yeah, well, I think like really, I'm kind of about to go into that because the main inspiration for this story was Country Doctor. I wanted to kind of update it for 2020 and have the midwives step in for the doctor's shoes, and showed just like, all the work that they do, the long hours, like the training that they have to do, the tools. Yeah. And I think like the births were so incredible, so incredible to witness, and the images are so special that I do feel like those women are a part of the story as well. But yeah. Yeah, so yeah, as I was saying, like, yeah, I like really drew inspiration from Country Doctor for this. I'm from a rural area, so that story had a huge impact when I first saw it. And I normally photograph in color. So this was a huge like step for me to make images in black and white. And the choice really was because things kind of felt garish in a way. Like the image became about the color of the couch or her jeans or something, and less so about the emotional connection that was happening between the midwife and the person and the like partner, and this like beautiful touch and care that's happening. I also love how you can't really tell what time period they're taken. Like I know some images, like I don't know what the hell that is, but it's definitely a sign of the times, whatever it may be. But yeah, I just love how you can't tell, they're kind of timeless. And I think that that really hints to the timelessness of the midwife's work as well.
So before you started the project, you knew you were going to shoot black and white?
No, I didn't. No, that happened after the first shoot. Like I started kind of going through them. And out of curiosity, I started toning one in black and white, and it was like, light bulb went off for me. So I devoured books on the subject as well. All the midwives had like lots of recommendations, which was awesome. So I learned more about like the culture, the training that they go through, which is so extensive, how laws differ between states, and also how it's much more accepted in Europe, which I found super interesting. And also the history of midwifery, which has been around for forever. And reading about it was really rage inducing to learn how much has been torn away from us as women. My husband listened to me rant many a time when I was reading a certain book, but it definitely fueled the passion for me to work on this project. There's nothing like, being pissed off about something to really, get you going for it. I also talked to my mom a lot about this, and I'm not just saying because she's watching. I'm lucky enough that my mom is a retired registered nurse and also a mom. So she has her own amazing birth stories of me and my sister. And we've never actually really talked about that before. So her sharing those stories with me, I think it brought a lot of depth to this project and a lot of understanding, just to hear how personal and lovely those stories were. And she also was like, her and my dad, who's a paramedic, like having their input on captioning was really amazing too. Like all the medical jargon, reminding me what a Doppler was, all that fun stuff. So were you saying something, Frank? So I'm not a mother myself yet, but it was incredibly important for me to, show these individual labor stories in a very unreal and unflinching way. Everything is made more difficult by a pandemic, and birth is included. But this pandemic has disproportionately affected women. And so I really wanted this project to illuminate some of that burden. I faced a number of challenges while working on this. One was, making sure I had correct PPE and keeping everybody safe. So I had a whole routine that I did: disinfecting gear, washing clothes, taking a shower. And it might seem like kind of insane now or extreme, but when I started this last March, I think it was pretty scary going out and going into people's homes and into these very small spaces, because we didn't know what this thing was. It was very unknown and terrifying because it was so unknown. So, and also, how do you take an intimate photograph when you have to stand 6 feet apart from someone? That was a huge challenge. And I remember talking with an editor when I was first starting, and I was sharing some images with him. He was like, "I can tell you're afraid." And it took a while for me to feel confident in my own, PPE and, my own routine that I got into, until it kind of just became a part of the process. But yeah, I remember one of the first times I was following a midwife, I remember touching a coffee table and then being like, "Oh my God, my hand, I have to disinfect my hand now." And then touching something else and being like, "Oh, I brushed something, oh no." So yeah, definitely you're juggling a lot when you're out in the world photographing during this time. But really, I think the biggest overall challenge was how to celebrate these women and show the reality of childbirth while also trying to make it as collaborative as possible. That was so important to me. So the midwives would connect me with clients that were interested in having me photograph their birth. They would tell a little bit about the project that I was working on. And then, they would give me their phone number, and I would try to, we would talk on the phone, and I would, ask them about their comfort level. If there was anything they did want photographed, is there anything they didn't want photographed? And then I would try to meet them in person, just to kind of see each other. We're masked, but we're still, a person talking to another person. And I think that really helped, especially I got really close with one of the mothers, she's a friend now, and that feels amazing that we met through working on this project. And she was so passionate, she would even be like, I'm on the toilet, you got to get this, and I felt that collaboration, and I think it made those images so much stronger because it was both of us working together to tell this story. Yeah, so I also just tried to, put my own ego and everything I thought I knew about birth, because I really didn't know anything, because TV births aren't real. And just be like a sponge, really try to learn as much as I could, because I do want to be a mother someday. And so having this amazing opportunity to talk to people and see how it all works, it was really quite incredible. And I remember talking to one of the student midwives who's around my age, and she's thinking about it too. And we just had this amazing conversation, oh, what are you thinking about doing? And then oh, you should try this. And oh, you need to remember to do this. And it just felt this trove of information that I didn't have access to before, opened up as the community welcomed me in.
So Maggie, you had to be drained after many of these experiences, right? I mean, emotionally, this must take an incredible toll.
Yeah, definitely. It was exhausting. And I don't usually cry while I'm editing photos, but being there for these moments and then going through them later after the adrenaline has worn off, it's so beautiful to see a child open his eyes for the first time. And I got to be there for that. It was so magical. And I feel I keep using words like that, magical, inspirational, but it's really that's what it was. It was so cool.
And where do you go with this, Mag? I mean, are you thinking of a book? Someone's asking.
Yeah. So you guys are one step ahead of me. I have my notes, and you're dead on where I'm about to talk. It's cool. Yeah. So I would love to see this as a book. It was published in the New York Times. I worked with the parenting photo editor, Tiffany Graham, and she made an amazing edit of the work. And I also worked with the reporter, Christina Karen, who treated everyone with such respect and love. It was the dreamiest situation that could have happened, and I love the final product. But yeah, it is an ongoing project for sure. I think since we hit that year mark, I started reaching out to everybody again just to see how they're doing. And one midwife had caught COVID and then recovered and is now back to work. And another is pregnant and invited me to photograph her birth, which is so cool. I guess I'm doing something right, if she wants me there, but.
And describe, this is right in someone's home, the shot.
This is at a birth center.
It's at a birth center, okay.
Yeah. So they have the birthing pool set up, and then there's a bed in the room too. So yeah, move seamlessly from pool to bed.
And the young lady on the bottom right there, she's on the computer. What's her role there?
So her, they are student midwives. So they're training with Shaman, who is their leader, I guess you could say. But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a very long and involved process to become a midwife. Because I remember when I started, I was this is such beautiful work. I want to become a midwife. And then oh, You have to like take science classes and stuff. Whoa, okay, I'll just keep like photographing it. I'm good doing my part this way. But yeah, they're both in school. But yeah, I think someone mentioned a book. I would love to see this as a book. And maybe not just like photographs, but also something educational. Because as I said, I feel like I learned how much I didn't know about our bodies and about birth. So if I could share like that tiny little nugget of knowledge that I learned, it would be so lovely to like share that with other women. Because I feel like, there's no right way to give birth. It's such a personal decision. I don't even know if I would want a home birth. Like if you want to do a hospital birth, that's great. If you want to, do a home birth, that's awesome too. But like, I just think it should be an informed decision. And I feel like a lot of that knowledge is taken away from us. So you got to take it back. I think this was right after I touched the coffee table and was freaking out silently about having to disinfect my hand.
Maggie, would you share how you feel making this project has transformed your photographic process and practice in sort of a longer term way?
Yeah, definitely. I think, I've always worked on personal documentary projects, but what I get hired to do before this was published was a lot of portrait work. And having this come out was such, I think my passion and love for the subject really showed. And I felt like all of these pieces fell together for this. So not only was I contacting people and developing those relationships, but also like being able to work on it for months was so special. And I think it gave me this whole skill set that I have. And I'm like so ready to bring to a new project. Because having that personal connection with everyone was really what kept me going through the exhaustion you mentioned, Frank. Because it was just so amazing to be like welcomed into these homes and into the birth centers. Yeah, and I also think like it's interesting. I feel like documentary photography is changing in so many ways right now, and there's a lot of growing pains happening. But I feel like, when I was photographing the mothers, I would share a gallery of the images with them. And, I'm like, if there's any you don't want shown, just tell me. And I feel like that, wouldn't be the case for a few newspapers or magazines. So, but I think, my respect for these people is more important than, having that, the newspaper be mad at me or something. And maybe that wouldn't be the case for every story, but for this one, it felt so important because they were putting their trust in me. So, I needed to, reciprocate that in a way.
That's got to be an incredible moment to witness, my God, and to have the presence of mind to take the photograph. I mean, that's just, wow.
His little hands. It was so beautiful. This was the birth where I was crying a lot during. It was so amazing to be there. And just the dad's smile too. I think this was at like 3 a.m. And I had to shoot for the next morning too. I'm like, I gotta stay. I'll deal with that when it comes. Cross that bridge when we get to it.
And I'm sure all these families must be thrilled to have this imagery for that, for their own personal history, right? I mean, that's got to be, yeah, how wonderful for them.
Yeah, I made little prints for people too. It was so fun. Like, that's one of the joys is, being able to share and like, they were so excited about them too. Like the feedback I got was really special. But yeah, I don't know if I went under my time or not.
No, it was just perfect. In fact, Brian Tomko, I think, just put up the link to your story from the Times.
Oh, thank you. That's nice.
So that's in the chat room. That is just really beautiful work. So top 5 stories that you've shot in your career?
Yeah, probably number one.
That right?
He blows everything out of the water. Shark fishing with a bunch of, dudes was really fun too. That has its own special place in my heart.
No, that is really really wonderful, and I'm sure looking at your parents, they've got that smile of pride that only parents can have. That's really beautiful.
I mean, I
Really
feel like, yeah, they're both such amazing people, and they help people with, my mom being a nurse, my dad being like a paramedic and firefighter. And I feel like photography is like, my way of giving back in this way. And it's so fun to be able to connect with them with all of this medical stuff too. 'Cause now, I feel like it's a fun conversation to have with them, and we can bond over it, and it feels really special.
Yeah, here's a question. Is there a difference between first-time moms and the ones who already had kids? Different experience?
Yeah, I think, every experience is so different. My friend Paige has insane stories of like her first doula thing, which I feel uncomfortable sharing, but just know that it's insane.
Yeah.
And her boss said that she's been working as a doula for 40 years and she's never seen anything like that. And I think that fits everything, like every birth is so different because we're all so different. But one thing I did notice is the 2 women it was their first child, they did end up being transported to the hospital. While the woman who it was her second child, her labor was a lot easier. So I don't want to give any like medical advice or anything, because I am in no way qualified, but that was something I noticed. So
Yeah, everyone is in the chat room is just loving the stories and loving the images.
thank you.
That's really
so
great,
nice.
Maggie.
Thank
So
you all.
will you continue this now? Like, what has it ended this project for you, or do you keep going? What do you do?
I'm going to keep going. Yeah, I have Shaman is, asking her current clients if they're down for me to come to a birth. I have a few other doulas that I'm excited to start following. I think like I needed a little time away from it just for some perspective and to go through everything and find like, the voice and the story in it. But yeah, no, I'm so excited to keep working on it, especially now that like, people are getting vaccinated and it does feel safer.
And the edit that you did with the Times, how is the editing process easy for you, difficult to give it to somebody and be comfortable with the edit? How does that work for you?
Yeah, I mean, I sent like selects. So I organized it by, birth or midwife I was following. And I trusted Tiffany to I mean, she's so talented. I love her work as an editor. And I think like, I gave her complete control over doing that. But there was one image that wasn't included. And I was like, you know what, this one's really important. And it shows this really special moment. Like, can you include this? And she was like, yeah, of course, we got to put that in. So yeah, definitely like, I think sometimes we got to push because we know the story better than anyone else for sure. So
Great. Well, Maggie, thank you so much for sharing that.